Welcome to Pennsylvania in Focus. I'm Kristen Smith. Pennsylvania has a mine pollution problem and America has a critical mineral shortage. And both problems may get solved as researchers find these critical and strategic elements in the polluted waters that come from acid mine drainage. If all goes well, Pennsylvania could become a leader in boosting national security, while potentially creating billions of dollars in value from environmental hazards. Joining me today is the Center Score's Pennsylvania reporter, Anthony Hennon. Anthony, explain it to me like I'm 5. What are rare earth elements, and what do they have to do with national security?
Yeah, so there's a few dozen rare earth elements, critical minerals. A common one a lot of people have heard of is lithium, which goes in all sorts of car batteries. It's used for solar panels. There's a bevy of these, half of which I can't really pronounce. But basically, these are crucial because these go into anything from energy production to technology to military applications. And the idea here is this is a crucial point for America to solidify these supply chains because they're so important for military, tech, and economic uses. And China controls the processing, refining, and sourcing of a lot of these. We see some numbers of these in Australia, the Congo, Chile. There's a number of countries, but really China has grown its control over these minerals in a lot of different ways. And so the idea here is the U.S. needs to basically rebuild its supply chains. For lithium, for instance, 30 years ago, America was a source of 30% of the global supply. Now we're less than 1%. So the idea here is the U.S. government, along with some academic research, some economic partners, et cetera, is looking to make sure we have supply chains for about 30 different minerals here. Pennsylvania, where this comes in, is in places like acid mine draining or coal ash and coal refuse, wastewater from fracking. We actually have amounts of various critical minerals. And the thing here is if Pennsylvania can take the environmental waste and the industrial waste here and refine it, you can basically rebuild America's supply chain of these critical minerals while also giving a big economic boost here and engaging in some environmental cleanup.
So rebuilding a supply chain, that sounds like a lengthy process. How long do researchers think this could take?
Yeah, it really varies by which mineral we're really talking about here. In a recent presentation for the Department of Environmental Protection's Citizens Advisory Council, Bernie Lynch, who comes from this group called the SCORE Consortium, which is focused on scandium, they're estimating that, there's a lot of lab experiments that are showing promise. Right now, a bunch of different groups are trying to scale it up, but we could see this popping up, within the next few years.
There's a lot of work to be done. What about the cost of all of this?
Yeah, it's hard to say. Where we're seeing some state and federal grants flow into some of these developments. Penn State University has a Center for Critical Minerals that received a couple million from the federal government to build a pilot plant to recover some elements, along with a $5 million grant. This year, House Republicans have been engaged on this. Some private businesses like Firepoint Energy is building a waste coal to fuel site, mostly for synthetic aviation fuel, but they're also hoping to extract up to $3 billion worth of rare earth minerals and other metals. So it's hard to say exactly how much this will cost. An analysis from the SCORE Consortium is estimating, looking at 61 major coal ash sites across Ohio, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania, they could have up to almost $40 billion in critical minerals and another $14 billion in rare earth elements. So they're predicting, this could, over about 30 years, build up hundreds of thousands of direct and indirect jobs. I think how much this will cost is kind of, in the next few years, we'll get a better picture of this as we see more of these developments try to go from the lab to broader commercialization, and we'll get a sense of what works on a large scale and what peters out and is kind of a dead end.
So it sounds like a win-win for the economy and the environment, but it's not always that simple. Where do environmental groups stand? I would assume that they have very specific recommendations about how to move forward with this in a way that's actually environmentally friendly and not damaging.
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking at this from a bird's eye view, a lot of the lithium extraction we're doing now is more out west, focused in these very large mines that take decades to get going, and then obviously can be very destructive of wherever they're digging these things up. But when you're looking at pulling from, acid mine drainage or coal ash waste, that's much less of an impact. It's actually cleaning up some of these things. But, it varies on which environmental groups you talk to. Bobby Hughes of the Eastern Pennsylvania Coalition for Abandoned Mine Reclamation sees some of this as basically low-hanging fruit because there's a lot of acid mine drainage that's on state-owned property, on parklands, lands owned by the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources or the Game Commission. So this could be a boon in basically setting up more monitors on these sites and making sure that we're cleaning up this discharge or preventing clean water from going into these mines in the first place. So there's a potential here that, maybe not every mine, but at least a number of mines that are discharging, scandium or lithium or all sorts of things. The fact that we have a bigger focus here, we're trying to build up a supply chain. It could be a big deal, and it could also lead to some cost savings elsewhere. A lot of these polluted mines flow into rivers that then flow into the Delaware, which is a source of municipal water for Philadelphia. And if you have cleaner water flowing into that, you have lower costs overall.
Anthony, thanks for joining us today. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com.